Okay, I have started recording and I am going to get us kicked off here real quick and then I will pass it on over to our star of the show. So thank you everyone for joining our Skill Up session today, your literature review breakthrough, tools, tips, and a little fun. And I'm really looking forward to this fun part of it. Um, I am Dr. Jenna Johnson. I am an academic learning specialist with the Academic Training Academy. I'm going to cover just a couple of things, housekeeping wise, as far as Zoom goes. We're recording. Hopefully, you got that little pop up. We're going to post this video to the Skill Up page in YouTube within about 24 hours. It should be up there sometime tomorrow. If you have any questions, you can use the chat if you'd like, or the Q&A. And then captions are enabled. So if you turn these on, you're going to do that in your Zoom control. Usually that's at the bottom of your screen. So all those tools down there. You'll see the CC option, and then you can choose to show captions. And then you can turn them off at any time. With that, I am going to turn it on over to our star, Dr. Walker-Roberts.
Again, welcome everybody to the Skill Up session. I want to personally thank Dr. Jenna for hosting us today. I am so excited because Dr. Jenna is my dissertation sister. And what does that mean? Yes, we have our chair, Dr. Maggie Broderick, here with us today. What a privilege. But she was both of our dissertation chairs. So we are all linked as a family reunion here today, and I just love it. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Galveo, who is not my dissertation sister, but almost like a sister to me. And she's here, and she's the university alumni navigator. So thank you so much, Dr. Galveo, for coming in. And I know a lot of students absolutely love you, and they get a lot of great advice and navigation from you. My name is Dr. Gary Walker-Roberts, and I am an assistant professor in the Sanford College of Education, hosting this seminar today, the Skill Up session. And I also am a dissertation chair and a subject matter expert in the teacher education department. We love our acronyms at the university, don't we? So in the TED department, and I'm a chair and an SME, and also a lead for the National University's online teaching and learning specialization, the OTL. So super excited to get here. I know there's a little pressure about this fun, but hopefully we'll bring some fun into the breakthrough of your literature review. And we'll move. So today's goal agenda, we are going to review the dissertation template, chapter 2 of the doctoral student experience. So there is another acronym, DSE, or section 1 of applied doctoral experiences, which is the ADE. Now, DSE and ADE only mean something internally to National University. So outside of National University, you don't have to mention DSE or ADE. This is just letting us know that you are either in the 5-chapter dissertation or the 3-section dissertation. So make sure you know which pathway that you are embarking on, so you know which dissertation template from the doctoral center to use. Review tools and tips to help progress in the literature review phase of writing the dissertation. So I've got some tools and tips and gems to really elevate for you to help you break through that literature review. And just a gentle reminder, if everyone could mute, or Dr. Jenna, if you could mute all participants, that would be wonderful. Last and not least, we're going to engage in a question and answer session at the end. But I do know that Dr. Jenna has told me that the chat is live, ongoing. So again, please go ahead and mute yourself, but feel free to use the chat. I won't be able to see the chat, but Dr. Jenna will be able to let us know what's going on in the chat, and I may call and respond for some engagement in that chat. Awesome. So first and foremost, let's talk about the dissertation templates and also the sequence. So the literature review takes place in the dissertation sequence number 1, so that first one. So as you can see on the screen, the doctoral student experience, the DSE, chapter 2 needs to meet the milestones in dissertation 90-100A, or the subsequent courses. So if we take a look at that, we can kind of zoom in here. You'll see that it could either be a dissertation 90-100 or the supplemental courses, but you do need the literature review approved in that first course. Moving over to the 3-section dissertation, that literature review needs to be approved in section 1 in the foundation. So just want to make sure that you know which pathway you're doing, the doctoral student experience, which is the chapters. So you have the 5 chapters, and then the applied doctoral experience, which is the ADE, which is the 3-section dissertation. Here it is, the blank page to break through. So where to start? So I know that we've all had that moment where we're looking at a blank Word document and we're like, how do we start this? Where do we go from here, especially with the literature review? As you can see, the first step is to get the guidance from the template. The template is something that National University is a point of difference than other universities, that we're able to give you a guidance, a guiding document to really help you break through, the writer's block or looking at that blank page, and you could start by using the template. As you can see, this is chapter 2. So this is the 5-chapter dissertation, and then it tells you in these bullets exactly what you're going to start writing about. So if we zoom in, you see here are the bullets, and we'll talk about these a little bit later, but it tells you how to start so you can start getting some writing on the page, which is absolutely fantastic. Where do you find tools on the literature review? In the Doctoral Center, and here is a picture of the Doctoral Center homepage. And you can find great resources here in the Chicklet. And then also with NU Academic Success Center coaches, you can have sessions. So let's zoom in just a little bit here to look at where you can find these. So the tools for the literature review are in the Chicklet on the home page, right underneath the blue banner. And you'll see that Chicklet. You could open the Chicklet, and then you can start to see all of the wonderful tools and resources to help you navigate through that literature review. On the other side, if you go to the Academic Success Center, you will see that you can meet with coaches. You could do group sessions, which are awesome, and they will help you analyze and synthesize information for your literature review. You also can certainly go to individual sessions, and also you can put in for like a proofreading where they could read over the document and give you feedback asynchronously. Fantastic. So these are some places where we'll find those tools, and we'll kind of dig in a little bit here in a minute as well. Now from the template, here's the introduction, milestones from the template. So I just took those squares, those bullets, and you actually can click on them and they will X in the template. But here's some of the top line milestones that you must reach if you are embarking on the literature review. Chapter 2 or within section 1. So in the DSE, you want to begin with the first sentence of the problem and purpose statement, but I highlighted this verbatim. So that means you can cut and paste from chapter 1 to chapter 2, the problem sentence statement and the purpose sentence statement. Not the whole thing, just those sentences, right? And that'll help kick you off with your literature review. Provide an overview of the literature, so orientate the reader on where this chapter or that section is going to lead them. Here comes some nuanced differences. So devote approximately 30 to 60 pages, right? That sounds daunting, but that's what we're going to do today, is break it down through that breakthrough so it doesn't seem like you're sitting down writing 60 pages in one setting. At least 80% of your sources should be no more than 5 years old, right? So that's very important. And also, when you're completed, make sure that Word document, the table of contents, is able to populate, calculate to the right area and sections. But don't do this alone. The ASC coaches are experts with the template. I've broken it many times, and all I do is get on with an ASC coach, and they will help fix it so it works perfectly and it works like a nice template. So it smoothly guides the reader to where they want to go when they click in the table of contents. The guideline instructions for the ADE, a little bit different, right? 16 to 25 pages. So it's a little bit less than what is expected in a PhD 5 chapter. Same thing, if you see a summary of the purpose statement, notice it doesn't say verbatim. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 are two independent chapters. That's why the PhD candidates are cutting and pasting verbatim so that the reader gets to see the problem and purpose statement as it was or is in Chapter 1. The EDD candidate doesn't need to do that because it's still within section 1, so they really haven't left a chapter to go to another. It's still within section 1. So instead of cutting and pasting, you're going to do a summary of the purpose statement and then do a brief explanation of how you're going to orient the reader that the literature review will unfold. In both you could see, in both you'll see that you are using the purpose and problem statement, but just a nuanced difference. And in the ADE, which you'll see is not in the DSE, is that the EDD candidate is going to present the academic databases, the search strategies, and the search engines like Google Scholar, Base, Ask a Co-host, things of that nature, and we'll see that in play later. Search parameters, including the search keywords, key phrases, and combinations, and make sure that those key terms and key phrases are italicized. So your academic reader will make sure that those are in italics. My pro tip here, so I promised you some tips. Discover published NU dissertations in the library. So all of the published dissertations are in ProQuest. I've actually seen some candidates write ProQuest in the engine search as well from NU Library. And you want to look for doctors who had your chair and or SME, subject matter expert. So, I always have my students go in and look for, if I'm chair, look for literature reviews that their SME has approved, right? So they could see the flow and what information that chair or that subject matter expert is looking for. So hopefully you know how to do that. But it's a great guide for you to use to really see how to structure your literature review. Again, notice the nuance between the two, and I explained it. One is because chapters, so you're leaving chapter 1 and going to chapter 2 for the literature review in the DSE, but in the ADE, the literature review is embedded right into the foundation, so you don't need to cut verbatim, and also you don't need a separate section for the academic databases in the ADE. Okay? Meet with your chair right away to review the process to complete the literature review. We all have a little bit of a different way to, have our candidates write the literature review, so you want to meet with them. And I am just one chair, and I want to say this very broad and loud. I am one chair doing the Skill Up today, but you definitely want to meet with your chair to see how they expect you to write the literature review and have that collaboration and closeness with them. So as promised, let's take a dive in and kind of look at some examples, just to kind of really give you the breakthrough of how am I supposed to start writing this. So first, the example of the ADE introduction, right? So here it is, chapter 2. And we could do a really nice zoom in here. The verbatim problem statement, the problem addressed in the study was, notice it's past tense because this is a published dissertation, but remember your dissertation proposed manuscript proposal needs to be in past tense. Here is the verbatim problem purpose statement. So the purpose of this qualitative phenomenological study. And then here is a brief explanation of the organization of how the literature is going to flow. So you can see that pretty clearly here, which I think is great. So that is in the introduction of chapter 2. Now let's take a look at the introduction of the ADE. You have a summary of the purpose statement. Notice it's not verbatim. It's giving a summary of the purpose and problem statement. Then it moves into the databases, the search engine, and the key terms in the year range. Again, notice it's in the ADE, not in the in the ADE, but not in the DSE. Okay, so we'll make that correction on the PowerPoint when we send it out. But in the EDD, the 3-section, notice you have the databases here, Google Scholar, perfect. The search engines, we have National University's library. We have key terms, and notice that they are italicized. And then you have the year range, so the range of the years. So all of that information is properly presented right here. So this is the introduction for both the ADE and the doctoral experience. Next, we'll go to the DSE, right? So the DSE is the 5-chapter, and the ADE is the 3-section. So you're going to explain the database in the documentation heading. So in the 5-chapter, in chapter 2, there is a heading called documentation. And you, under the documentation heading, is where you put the databases and search engines. It's where you're going to put the search parameters, the range of years, and the type of literature. And then you're going to italicize the keyword searches. But the documentation, it belongs in is more of the information and the introduction of the ADE. It does not have a heading called documentation. And that's exactly what we just saw before, where it's in the body. So documentation is a heading in the DSE, but not in the ADE. The documentation information is in the body of the ADE in section 1. Okay, so just make sure you know that. Databases, search engines, you have Google Scholar, Base, Sage, EBSCOhost, etc. And then the parameters usually are talking about like if you're using the range of years of the literature review, you want to use seminal work, which are really late. That usually happens with your framework, and then more current peer-reviewed journal articles, such as up to 2026, to really make sure that your information is relevant. This will help you make the milestones for the documentation or the information part of the literature review. Also, key terms and key phrases, right? Remember to italicize them. So I have some examples here. Online learning, asynchronous classes, synchronous classes, brick and mortar, etc. So let's take a look at it in action. So here's the DSE. Chapter 2 uses the heading documentation. Do you see that? So let me highlight that. So if you look here, it's under this heading. Oops, I keep doing that. So under this heading documentation, here it is. So you want to make sure in chapter 2 you have that heading documentation. Don't add any headings to the template unless it asks you to for like the subtopics. Other than that, do not add or subtract any of the headings that are already in the template. Here are the search engines. Again, I think we've already kind of seen this. Google Scholar, this candidate, this doctor mentions national universities, navigation search engines. And then the terms are in italicized, and the date range are there for you from 2021 to 2025. Perfect. Good job. So this one absolutely meets milestones. If you take a look across the way, you see that you have in The ADE, no heading. It's in the body, right? So there's no heading, it's in the body, and then you see the search engines, you see the search terms, and you see the date. So absolutely fantastic. This section 1, a part of the literature review, meets the milestones. Excellent. Now let's talk about the framework. Framework is the next section in the literature review. Here are the milestones. So, and again, we'll continue to talk about DSE and ADE. In the DSE, frameworks is a heading. And guess what? In the ADE, there's no presentation of the literature of the framework in the literature review and the ADE. So that's a nuanced difference because again, in section 1, you already talk about framework earlier than the literature review, so you don't have to address it again. But in chapter 2 for the DSE, you do have to address the framework. And I bullet point some of those milestones that you really want to make sure you are highlighting. Describe the guiding framework of the study. So you're going to reintroduce the framework. Who are the authors behind the framework, or who's the author behind the framework? What are the components of that framework, the origin and development of the framework? And then this third bullet point is really important. So you want to make sure that you're introducing or holding evidence of the framework that has been supported by other existing research. Additionally, you can mention alternative frameworks with a justification of why the selected framework was chosen. So usually what happens here, it's like one, and you can mention that framework that perhaps you thought you were going to frame the study with, but then you rejected it, and why. And I have an example of that a little bit later in the next slide. You want to discuss the research problem within the context of the framework. So think about the framework, right? And you're doing an overview of the guiding framework. Then put it in terms of your study. So plug in the terms into, that framework to explain to the reader how is it framing your study. Remember to review the shorter framework section in chapter 1 in the DSE pathway to ensure alignment with this section. So what that means is that you don't want to introduce new frameworks in the framework section unless you're mentioning it for a rejection purpose, or if you decide, oh, I want to use an underpinning framework and introduce a new framework, then have that discussion with your chair, because you have to go back to chapter 1. Remember that iterative process. Go back to chapter 1 and also put it in chapter 1 as an underpinning framework. However, don't just arbitrarily introduce a new framework without having that conversation with your chair. So here are my pro tips. Candidates in the DSE, be sure the framework aligns in chapter 1. Like I said, try not to introduce any new frameworks, or else you have to go back to chapter 1 and write about it. 2 approaches: write about your frameworks, utilizing only one framework that you introduced in chapter 1 if you're only using one framework for the entire study, or write about the framework you chose and one that you rejected. If you chose 2 frameworks to frame your study, then you've already talked about that either in your section 1 or you talked about it in chapter 1. So it's okay to write about the framework in 2 frameworks at that point. Candidates in the ADE framework appears in section 1, so therefore you do not need to review it again as a heading in that section. Here are some examples of the framework in the ADE and the DSE. Oh, did anyone catch that? Did anyone put that in the chat? Well, what do you mean? There's not the frameworks heading in the DSE, right? So this is only the ADE. So in the ADE, you'll see here the framework section. So there is the subtopic, the heading, and then there is the expansion on the framework in chapter 1. If we move to the right, you see the example of the rejection. So let me just kind of zoom in on the rejection, mention alternative frameworks. So this doctor, by the way, this is mine. I thought Tito's theory was going to be an underpinning framework, but working with Dr. Broderick, I learned that, Tito's framework is more for in-person pedagogy, and I was doing my research on online platforms. So it was not good to frame my study with Tito's theory. We went with a different theory, social exchange theory, but I wanted to just talk about how it was rejected. So here's a rejected example of how I introduced Tito's theory and why it was rejected from this study. So that's good
Dr.
just for
Gary.
framework analysis, all right?
Dr.
And then
Gary,
we'll move to
just wanted to, hi.
subtopics. Hi, Dr. Emily.
Hi. I just wanted to let you know, as a friendly reminder, you're about halfway through your presentation. Dr. Jenna had some Zoom problems, so I stepped in for her. So I'll be hanging out, but you're about halfway through.
I love it. Thank you. Welcome in, Dr. Emily. Yep, we're right on target. So here are subtopics. Now we're going into the meat and potatoes of the literature review. So here are the subtopics of the literature review and the milestones that need to be met. So you want to critically analyze and synthesize. And what I've highlighted here are a couple of words that indicate when synthesis is happening. Converging the literature or diverging the literature. Where do authors come together and agree on some subtopics? And where do they pull apart and have a disagreement? And you really want to be balanced, right? And not let your bias come into the literature review. And also the theme headings in the ADE, you see it's very similar. So, when you're doing the subtopics for both the 5-chapter or the 3-section, they're very, very similar. You want peer-reviewed, research published articles within the last 5 years. You want to critically analyze and synthesize. So we're going to get into some analyzation and synthesis at the second half of this session. So that's where we're headed. And let's see how we can converge and diverge the literature. So create an outline. This is the first little tip. Create an outline of subtopics of research theme headings. Here's my pro tip. Lean into LLMs. What are LLMs, right? So, the AI chats and bots are your friend. They are thought partners, but not co-authors. I think that's very important to use them as thought partners and not co-authors. And I did a fun exercise because ChatGPT and the LLMs weren't as big as they are today when I went through the doctoral phase and graduated in 2020, so 6 years ago. So I wanted to do what I submitted to Dr. Broderick when I was a student. You'll see that on the right side of the screen was my outline that I sent to her of, here we go, of my literature review. So this is the outline that I sent to Dr. B. And I said, I think these are the main themes that I noticed in the literature, right? So I had a meeting with her and this is what we ended up saying, okay, let's go ahead and synthesize the literature on these topics. And then as you could see on the left side of the screen, I went to ChatGPT and I put my problem statement in. So I wanted to go in and see what it would kick out for me to see how the engine was a great thought partner. And it started kicking out the topics for me, and I kind of hid them, but I invite you, if you have another screen, you can take the problem statement and pop it into the literature or pop it into ChatGPT and then see what the topics are that it comes up with. And I have to tell you, it's pretty very, I mean, maybe ChatGPT is pulling from my published dissertation, but they're very similar. And you'll see that, oh, there's some topics that I maybe could have chosen, or some topics that are almost exactly the same of what I have on my literature review. So I think that's a great way to use the LLMs in the beginning to get that breakthrough, to go in and just see what some of the topics that have been synthesized in literature reviews that pertain to your problem statement, and see what it pops out. So use that as a wonderful thought partner. And then here is another pro tip. Be prepared, but schedule some meetings with your chair and also a librarian. I think it's very important. So that's like a little pro tip for me as well. Seek your chair's guidance and advice. So instead of sitting down and writing the entire literature review, do it in chunks and stages. Start with an outline. Right? Start with key words and phrases first that you see in the literature. Then move to an outline, and then meet with your chair and come prepared and say, this is the outline that I came up with. What do you think about this outline, right? And then we could scaffold it, or put it in a different order or different context, or see if there's something hot off the press that you could really synthesize. And then go to your librarian. So you could see Amanda on this side, whom I love. She was my librarian as I was a student. I know she has many students, but I always considered her my personal librarian. She's absolutely fabulous. And they can help locate germane articles and what search engines you could use, and just keep track of which ones you're using, date ranges, Boolean searches, right? She's really good at those. Identify the best search engines and keywords. So keep track of that. Run now, even if you're just in your content courses, run now and meet with a librarian. I think that's so important. But let me talk about AI again. Just be very careful using AI as, a thought partner, because they could give you hallucinations. So you want to make sure that you're working with a librarian to use National University's engines to make sure that the articles, the peer-reviewed articles, are germane and real, right? So really, if you're having just a blank page, or just a blank, where do I go? Don't become the Tin Man and stand still. Keep moving, go to your chair, go to the Academic Success Center, go to the library, and really use other people to help really ignite that. So here are some building on NU tools. So use and use tools. I say use and use tools because we are all from NU and we all work with the same tools. So this is the synthesis tool. So you can find it in the doctoral center, and it's under the literature review right here. So you can find it in the literature review. And this is exactly what the matrix looks like, the synthesis matrix, which will help you gather enough articles to start synthesizing. And that's where we're going next. How do we synthesize? How do we analyze and synthesize? So what I did is I took the same literature review outline. Here's the topic. Then you can get the articles that you can synthesize for the topic. And then you can actually go to the dissertation and see how it's been synthesized, which I think is so important. My pro tip here is go one subtopic at a time. Write one subtopic, have it written out in the text, and then send it to your chair or meet with your chair just to see if you're synthesizing and analyzing in the right way. That'll give you some great feedback. Also, there are some words that indicate to the reader that synthesis is happening. And here's a hint. Some are highlighted in the template. I kind of went over it a little bit earlier. But if we take a deeper dive, here they are: converge and diverge, right? So really important to see. And then you could use ChatGPT, your thought partner, and ask words that trigger synthesis is happening in a literature review. If you take a moment, you can go ahead and go to a ChatGPT or Gemini and put it in there and see what does ChatGPT tell you about words that indicate that synthesis is happening. And that brings us to the fun today. So we're going to do a little bit of an active poll. You could take your phone and hold it up to the QR code here. It'll trigger on your phone or on your computer. So just take your phone, put it there, see if it comes up. And now what I want you to do is type in some words that you think. Oh, argued, yes. Yes, so this author argued this. Conversely, yes, great. Any other words? Yep, so we can keep that going. Agreement. And if you need some help, you always can use that ChatGPT, say what words come up with ChatGPT. Agree. Build upon. Yes, I love build upon. Yes, good, good. Converge, conclude. Yes, concluded. Words that trigger literature review. Oh, yay, good. Disputed. Yes, in agreement. Integrated. Let's see, overarching analysis. Upheld. Oh, I like the upheld. Very good, upheld. So yeah, these are great words that are triggering, right? So triggering that there's synthesis happening within the literature review. So now with that said, I see some people still typing, but with that said, you could take this now, this screen, and go to published dissertations and see if you see some of these aligned. Very good. See if you see a built upon. Very good. Oh, y'all are great. So see if you can see some of these words within the dissertation to really trigger that this is happening. Great job. I think once I click out, it'll close the poll, but that's okay. We'll move on to see some examples of it happening in real time in the dissertation. So first on the left side, you will see some examples of how, and I took this actually right from somebody's dissertation. So I just did I'm the reviewer, but I wanted to show you some examples of analysis. So, you know, McWilliams found that triggers analysis. And then there's an example of a synthesis. McWilliams findings merged. Did that word show up earlier? Merged. Yep, they merged together with the Society of Human Resource Management. And here is how they analyzed the example of Society of Human Resource Management. Then they aligned. I did see that word. So aligned is here, which is an example of synthesis. And then pepper in some divergent views, right? You want to make sure that your literature review is balanced so it doesn't trigger bias, but go ahead and certainly put in some divergent viewpoints. It doesn't have to be everywhere, but just make sure that you're giving a balanced and equal opportunity of a voice within your literature review. Let's move to the right side, and this is going to be fun. Emily, Dr. Emily, I might need your help on this one. So I'm going to have everyone put this in the chat. So this is a discovery exercise. So in this discovery exercise, do you see anywhere there is synthesis? Can you type in the chat any words that you see that indicate synthesis that we just did? Does anybody see any words that indicate synthesis?
Supported, converged.
Is there converge? Yep, there's converged here. Good, I see it.
Similarly.
Highlighted.
Similarly.
What was it?
Similarly.
Similarly,
Right
yes,
above.
perfect, got it. Good.
Highlighted.
Highlighted, yes, thanks for jumping in. Good, see? So it's a very easy to now start to really look for where in a literature review there's emergence, convergence, there's synthesis, and then there's analysis. So very good. Good job. Awesome. So those, I hope, were the fun parts of of the session, like really learning how to do the synthesis part with the word cloud and then the discovery. So as we narrow down today, I want you to have fun writing your literature review. I want you to think of it as like a puzzle. So, from the blank page breakthrough to really using our template, looking at other dissertations that have published, and really start to develop the literature review one section at a time. Or if you're in section one, just in section one, the literature review, just do one component at a time, and then you'll start to see your paper fill up, fill up, fill up, fill up. So those are my tips, tricks on how to write your literature review. And then also I want you to look at Skills Up. There's many Skills Up on literature reviews. There's now the Skill Up that will enter into the library. And you'll see that there's wonderful skill ups on other things in the doctoral center. For example, I've done exempt from further review. Now what? After you get IRB approval, stay focused on the prize, graduation, right? Oh, we have graduation this weekend. So, so exciting. That is the commencement, the beginning after you earn your doctoral degree. Focusing on chapter 4 and 5 or section 3 of the qualitative dissertation study. And then the 3 Ps that prepare doctoral candidates for a successful oral defense. Speaking of the oral defense, all candidates do the oral defense and they have a part about literature review. So attend those dissertation defenses and listen to live candidates that are becoming doctors speak about how they synthesized their literature. Also, you can find the skill ups in the doctoral center right next to boot camp. So it's incumbent upon me to shout out boot camp. You can come to, I know Janice is coming to boot camp later in the month. I can't wait to see you there. But you can come to boot camp. You'll see in live sessions how we do a literature review live session, and we workshop and really synthesize and analyze the literature to make sure that your literature review is going in the right direction. And last but not least, bravo to each and every one of you for making it to the end of my presentation. Thank you, Dr. Jenna, and also now Dr. Emily, which I'm so happy you made appearance on the last one, right? Like from your department. Dr. Emily has been so supportive and for all of my skill ups. So it's really nice to have you here. And Dr. Jenna, we celebrated that she's my dissertation sister with Dr. Broderick here as well. So my last pro tip is collaborate with your chair. You have to have a good relationship with your chair. Walk them through this. If you get the recording of this, send the recording to them and say, this is how, Dr. Gowrie scaffolds the literature review for a breakthrough from a blank page to a fully written and approved literature review, and give them the opportunity to meet with you and give their nuances and their tips and tricks. And so now what we'll do is we'll open it up for the last 15 minutes for a Q&A session. I know I do go fast, but the good news is when you get the recording, you can pause and go back and listen. We'll send out the slideshow as well to you, so you'll get the deck, and then you could do both as an asynchronous student to really kind of go back and watch it and slow it down and pause and do all of those great things. So Dr. Emily, I'll pass it over to you,
Yes,
and then maybe you can guide us through question and answer. Again, I can't see the chat. Don't know if there's questions or whatnot.
that's okay. Absolutely. Yeah, and thank you so much, Dr. Gary, for coming. And it is a lot to explain both tracks. And what I love about how you did this is you've done the side by side in a lot of the screens. So as an asynchronous resource, students can go back and they're like, okay, I'm the ADE track. I want to look at this part. And I love that it's inclusive of both ways, just because it helps our students, be able to focus on, hey, what's relevant to me? And yeah, and you're getting some hearts for all of that. So if there's questions that do come up in the chat, please let me know. I saw Amanda Bazette in here posting a lot of different resources available for research synthesis, and I'm going to keep the chat with, I'll pull out those resources Amanda, so that we can include them in the follow-up email as well
Perfect.
too. So that'll be quick links. And so just as a reminder, as Dr. Gary pointed out, you will get access to the PowerPoint. And then of course we're gonna post the recorded session on the YouTube channel. Someone had mentioned they have some questions, but they're still processing the presentation. Is there an email I can contact to ask my questions to? And I'm going to say one thing first, and then I'll let Dr. Gary weigh in. I would say if you do have questions related to your specific dissertation topic and your framework or your research questions, et cetera, the whole piece of your dissertation, I would go to your chair first. But if you have general questions about research process or something along those lines, of course, we have our resources in the Academic Success Center, so you could reach out to a coach, ask some questions in the library as well too. They have the chat option. And then I wanted to point out the resources available in the Commons. So that is a space for our NU students where they could ask a general question about research and have multiple people weigh in potentially on that question. And I will pause here because I do know, Dr. Gary, it is a lot of information to take in sometimes, especially depending where you are in the process. Like, what if you're at the very beginning,
Yeah,
right?
and I'll jump in on that, Dr. Emily. So, the email question. If you are in your content courses, fantastic. Email your professor, right? If you're in the literature review course, email that professor, right? I think that's the best recourse, like you had said. If you are in the dissertation process, email Zoom with your chair. I think that's very, very important. I would like to take an opportunity now. We'll try to get this in the recording. I did have a mistake with the ADE and DSC, and I've corrected the screen now here, and you'll get it corrected on the slide. But, to Dr. Emily's point, it is very, very nuanced and very confusing sometimes when we use that acronym DSE and ADE. So go back and just know that I did change here for you to the DSE, which is the 5 chapters. So I just wanted to highlight that for you, that I have made that update, and I do apologize about that. So
Oh,
excellent.
no apologies necessary, Dr. Gary. There's a lot that goes into the dissertation process, and then not to understand one way, but both ways that they are done. You truly are an expert in this area. Someone had mentioned they don't have any questions at this time, but this has been great. They're working on their chapter 2. I just want to say huzzah to you. And then they feel so much better. So thanks again for today's session. So, Dr. Geary, I don't see any questions that have come up in the Q&A or the chat, but I did want to say it's been a pleasure working with you in the Skill Up series, and just so everyone knows, all of our new students, the Skill Up series is still continuing. It's just going to be actually located in the Academic Success Center from here on out, coming in July. So more support for you and your resources and all of that. And we're looking forward to be able to be a partner and support you in your academic journey. So there's that to be said. And then Dr. Gary, as always, you're a joy to work with at NU, and you're so great to our students. Thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you, Dr. Emily. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and best of luck with that literature review.